Okay, here is the next video lecture for Introduction to Psychology. We're talking about the level of the brain. Now we move to the second of the three levels, which is the level of the person. Psychology at times, and actually most of the time for this course, will focus on the individual. We will spend some time looking at the brain itself, but we're going to spend most of our time talking about things like feelings, motivation, perception, beliefs, preferences, all of these things that are not necessarily, that we can't necessarily trace exclusively to the brain, but to the way a person functions. I'm going to use perception as my example. This is a real situation, and I'll explain more as we go so I don't give it away. How many of you have ever misperceived a text, the tone of a text? You think someone's being short with you, and really they're just, maybe they're tired. Or someone says something and you take it out of context and you misperceive it. We've all done it. This is a real life texting situation between a teenage boy and his girlfriend, and I have literally reproduced the text just the way that they happened. I've changed the names of the people to protect them. So Joe, he texts, "OMG, baby, the girl in math class just hit on me, I think." Sue, "OMG, really not cool." Joe, "Yeah, I know, right? You should kick her ass, LOL." Sue, "Yeah, I think I will." So what do you think happens next? I'll let you kind of think about this for a second. To me, when I look at that, I think, well, maybe they're just joking. Joe's kidding with Sue. Sue knows that Joe is joking. They're just kind of playing. Or does Sue perceive that Joe is being serious? Well, you guessed it. Joe, in the police, and I do say police report because this girl actually went to prison for assault. Joe said he was totally kidding, and he thought that Sue knew that he was kidding. But Sue thought Joe was serious, so she beat this girl to a pulp because she thought this other girl was moving in on her boyfriend. So she totally misperceived the situation. Then we get to what's called the level of the group. We don't spend a whole lot of time here. This is more sociological. But it is important to understand and realize that groups impact us as individuals. We all want to conform at times. We all try to do things to fit in. So groups of people do influence us, whether it's our peers, our parents, our churches, our schools, wherever the social situation is. Now, how can group pressures or social environments cause, contribute, or manifest as mental health problems? Well, it's very possible. Social phobia. Clearly, 11 to 12% of people in this country suffer from what's called a social phobia. It is the morbid fear of public speaking. I have students in every class who tell me they would rather take a beating than stand up in front of their classmates and talk. I used to be one of those people, not so much anymore. But I had an adult client who was so afraid of speaking in public. He was actually making good money. He was making six figures with this job. And he was asked to do a presentation, to fly to Houston, Texas and give a presentation to thousands of people. And he couldn't do it. He came up with the excuse that his grandmother had passed. So that works once or twice, but once you get to the third or fourth grandma who's died, people start asking you questions. So he came to me, and he was asking for help. And as is often the case, I asked him if something had happened to him that was traumatic during childhood. And as he thought about it, he remembered, he said yes. He said when I was in grade school, he was like in 4th or 5th grade, he was giving a speech in front of his peers, including girls, the principals, parents, people from the community. And one of his buddies thought it would be cute to run up behind him on stage and pull his pants down, except he didn't just get the pants, he got the underwear as well. So you can imagine how horrific that is when you're at any age, but especially when you're in the 4th or the 5th grade. And this just really set the stage for him to have real problems. Now, that's an example of how the social environment can create a mental health problem. I've had clients who refuse to leave their homes. The agoraphobic is the person who fears that something horrible or incapacitating will happen to them if they leave their homes, so they don't leave. I had a woman who had a panic attack, and she went unconscious and was rescued in the town center mall in front of hundreds of people, and it embarrassed her to the point where she would not leave her home for 10 years. What about natural disasters? Things that happen in the natural world, can these things contribute to mental health problems? And the answer is yes. I mean, you may be perfectly healthy mentally or otherwise. God forbid you go home and you find that your home is burned to the ground, or you find that a flood has wiped out your residence or wiped out your automobile. Can this kind of stuff create anxiety or depression or post-traumatic stress? Certainly it can. Now we get to the 3 grand issues of psychology. These are mentioned in your book as well, and I'm going to talk about them. These are important to have in your notes too. There are 3 big issues in psychology that we wrestle with, and we continue to wrestle with. I'm adjusting my camera, guys. Sorry, I'm having some issues. There we go. That's better. The first one is stability versus change. To what extent do things stay the same, and to what extent do things change? It's hard to think of things that never ever change. Your sex, being male or female for the most part, but then again, you can change that if you really want to. Your birth date, your social security number probably doesn't change. Your blood type's not going to change. However, lots of things can and do change. Even mental health disorders. Most mental health problems aren't going to be the same all the time. Someone who is depressed right now may not be depressed a year from now, and they may be depressed again 10 years from now. Just because someone is schizophrenic, maybe they're seeing things or hearing voices that are not real. They may not be that way in 5 years. They'll be schizophrenic probably, but they may not be suffering from hallucinations 24/7. Depression can change, anxiety can change, medications and therapy can alleviate some of these mental health problems. So, the next and probably the biggest issue that we wrestle with is the nature versus nurture issue. We still don't have good answers for this question. Are we born with what makes us what we are in terms of our intelligence, our looks, our propensity to develop physical or mental health problems? Or is it the environment? Is it just being in the wrong place at the wrong time? Is it as simple as that? Can that create mental health problems? Maybe it's both. And the answer is probably, it's probably a little bit biology or nature, and it's probably a little bit the environment or nurture. And we'll go back and forth with that. Sexual orientation. There's been a debate for years in the social sciences, and we still do not have clear answers. Is homosexuality a choice? In other words, is it environment, or is it biological? Are we born being straight? Are we born being gay? Are we born being bisexual? Or does it depend? Is it a little of both? There are strong proponents on both sides of the issue. Physical attractiveness, people that we are physically attracted to or sexually attracted to. Are we born this way? Are we born being sexually or physically attracted to a specific type of person? Or does society pretty much define that standard for us? Or is it both? If you go back into the 1940s and 50s, the ideal body type for a woman was a size 18 to 20. By today's standards, that woman would be considered by many to be overweight. If you go back to the Renaissance, women who were morbidly obese by today's standards were considered to be the epitome of physically and sexually attractive, because weight was associated with wealth. If you had money, you could afford to eat. Excuse me. So society does define a little bit of this stuff for us. Then we get into rationality versus irrationality. If you act irrationally, that means that you're acting without reason or devoid of reason. We've all acted irrationally. Have you ever thrown your phone in anger and broken it? Have you ever punched a locker or slammed a door? This is irrational behavior, but we've all probably done some of these things. Doesn't mean that you have a mental health disorder necessarily. A lot of times people with mental health disorders, whether it's depression or schizophrenia or whatever, obsessive compulsive disorder, whatever disorder you want to name, will act without reason or devoid of reason at times. But sometimes people with severe mental health disorders can act very rationally. They can make sound and good decisions. So we go back and forth between what is rational and what is not rational. Now, before I show you this last slide, I would ask you at this point, If I had your favorite chocolate candy bar, whatever it is, it could be Reese Cup, it can be a Snicker bar, it can be whatever you want it to be. If I had it right now for you, would you eat it? And I bet 95% of you would say, well, yes, Brandon, we would eat that wonderful, highly coveted chocolate that you have that I love. Okay, I'm going to present it to you, but it's going to look like this. How many of you now would not eat? And think to yourself, if I gave you your favorite chocolate candy and it looked like that, like poop, and it was served in essentially a toilet that looked like that, would you still eat it? And some of you are going to tell me, no, I'm not going to eat it now. Well, by definition, you are making an irrational decision. You know in your minds that it's not really poop, even though it looks like it. But just the fact that you see it and it looks like poop makes it impossible for you to eat it. Now, I know some of you would say, yeah, I'll eat it anyway, and that's fine. You probably would, and that's fine. But those of you who would not eat it now, you're making an irrational decision. Now, does that mean that you have a mental health disorder? Well, certainly not. But it just proves the point that we can all make irrational decisions. We know that something is right or appropriate, but we still can't bring ourselves to make the decision or to pull the trigger to do the right thing, or to eat the chocolate, if you will, in this case. Now, I'm going to call that the end of this part. Thank you.